Chris Hobson from Recharge in London. Maria, I just wondered if I could ask you what you think of the realistic prospects of this type of system being introduced in Europe when, as we know, power companies, particularly in Europe, have got very difficult economic problems. There's a lot of them with very deep black holes at the moment. And what are the chances of these types of systems actually being introduced at a time when we've obviously just had a big energy review in Europe, and there's a lot of very big challenges?
Well, of course, this is the big problem and the big question for Europe, and especially now where these EU leaders grapple with energy climate policy to 2030, the big question is what are they going to decide? We are working at this moment on our own report, our in-depth review on the whole of the European energy policy, so I cannot really talk about that, but what I can do is to highlight several implications for Europe that you can detect from this report. The first one is that it's important to understand that the underutilization of existing power plants is not a specific consequence of variable renewables. It reflects the additional creation of oversupply and would happen also with the introduction of other technologies such as hydro or nuclear power plants in a stable system. What you also signal is a mismatch between the current situation in Europe in terms of policies, market conditions, and on the other hand, there is this long-term need for a significantly more flexible European power system. So the future EU mix will need more flexible power plants, including from gas. So cheaper gas, higher coal prices, and higher CO2 prices would contribute to shifting this hit into the right direction. And improving the European emissions trading system is, of course, the first step here. Then we can see that when we are talking about storage, the pumped hydro storage plants are underutilized in Europe. So these are just a couple of comments on what this report could mean for the European situation. But I think it's also very important to realize that one of the questions Europe has to answer is, for instance, the question of market development and interconnection. There's still not enough interconnection between Europe. It's still a problem when you generate a lot of renewable energy in Spain to export that to France. It's still a problem. And the wind energy that is produced in the northern part of Germany is still using the grid of its neighbors to go down to part of Germany where you need it. So I think it's important that Europe really faces these challenges, not only looking at the production, the generation of renewables, but also at the market conditions, the power system, the transmission grids, and these things that are really very important to solve in the next years to come.
If I may add just one word, I would say there are a number of no-regret options, and the first is to improve markets to better the price, the value of flexibility. Europe has made good progress on wholesale markets, but balancing markets need to come next. The second is we discussed a lot is grids. Expanding grids is a must, both inside of countries and between countries. Europe has ambitious projects. Let's do it. And the third then is remain to committed long-term policy objectives with a robust CO2 price and with appropriate policies. We don't want to give details on that because of the EU IDR, but it's clear that the policies need to have more consistency.
Okay, thanks.
Next question, please.
Your next question comes to the line of Ingo Arzt. Please ask your question.
Hello, Ingo Arzt from the German newspaper Taz. I have two questions. First of all, if Germany already made a big mistake because we have a high concentration of wind power in the north of Germany and very few concentration in the south of Germany, what leads to a big need of new grids through Germany. And my second question is if the use of coal, especially brown coal, is the right way for flexible power plants that you mentioned that are needed for transforming the energy system?
Well, first of all, your first question, the situation is not that extreme. And what we can see that is that Germany is paying the price for a very for being a front runner in the very first stage of the deployment of solar PV and wind in energy. So let's not forget about that, because it is because of what happened in Germany that now prices are coming down because the costs are coming down. So we have to take that into account as well. And what we can see in Germany, that is that a lot of extra electricity was generated, and that the wholesale prices that go with that are quite low, and industry is profiting, is benefiting from that. So that is my first remark. My second remark on coal and brown coal, well, this is of course something that Germany needs to look into, because we all know that Germany would like to have a green profile and at the same time is phasing out nuclear. So you have to do something to fill that gap. And well, what we can see at this moment, that is that brown coal and coal is coming back to the German and also to the Dutch markets. Where I'm from the Netherlands, I can see the same thing there. And that gas is actually pushed out of that market. And that's something that needs to be looked into as well.
Thank you.
Next question, please.
Your next question comes on the line of Rick Mitchell. Please ask your question.
Rick Mitchell, Bloomberg BNA. What about the situation in the United States? What does the United States need to do this deployment? And how does the boom in natural gas affect this? How can this be used together with the boom in unconventional gases, like especially shale gas? Thank you.
Well, it is interesting that you asked that question, and the point, of course, is that the United States is a very big country, and it really depends on what part of the United States we are talking about. And as Paulo mentioned, the situation in Texas with a growing demand and rather tight capacities, so it resembles a dynamic system, is quite different from other parts of the United States. What we can see that is that due to environmental regulations, a large number of old coal plants will be retired in the short and medium term. And this opens an opportunity to get to a transformed system more quickly. But of course, investors need to prioritize flexibility for that to happen. Then of course, the question is gas a friend of renewables or not? Well, gas does not pose a barrier to the integration of variable renewable energy. In fact, the opposition is true, and it has two main reasons. First, gas plants are cheap to build, and second, you can start and stop certain gas power plants very often and at short notice. But of course, what we see in the United States, where utilities are building gas plants hand in hand with wind power plants, we can see that these both technologies do fit quite well. So using gas to get rid of coal, that gets us in the right direction to prevent dangerous climate change. No doubt about that. But in the long term, gas will not get the job done to reach the 2-degree target. Gas without carbon capture and storage is not a low-carbon technology. It's a fossil fuel. It's the cleanest we have, but it's a fossil fuel. Paulo, maybe you would like to add something to that.
I would only like to add that the low price of gas and the low prices of electricity in the U.S. are actually an advantage, because you can allocate the small extra cost of renewables in a better way, while in Europe is the opposite, because European customers feel the high prices of gas, and on top of that, some extra costs that are coming from renewables.
Feed-in tariffs.
Yes, exactly. The extra costs that come from the economic incentives.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Next question, please.
It comes from the line of Leonard Sanford. Your line is open.
Yes, hello, good afternoon. It's Leonard Sanford in London, Modern Power Systems magazine. My question is this. You have prescribed a plan of action for various states that want to integrate large amounts of renewables. Many countries already have a substantial amount of renewables, China, USA, Germany, to some extent Spain. What is the record of these countries in relation to the prescription you've given, to the plan of action you've already laid out? How well are they doing in following that line?
Well, to start with, let's take the record country, which is Denmark. Denmark is very advanced in many respects, but has also, so for instance, it uses state-of-the-art forecasting techniques. It has a lot of interconnection and good market operations, but it still will need more flexibility in its power system in the future. And the Nordic power market as a whole will need to decarbonize further because it still has quite a bit of coal. Now, if you then speak about China and the United States, as a whole, they only have a few percent of variable renewables in the mix. So there is vast potential to go before they enter in the need of new investments. But one thing is clear, and it was particularly clear in China, it has to be planned hand in hand. There is already the example of Inner Mongolia, where the deployment of wind was much quicker than the deployment of grids, and this immediately led to severe curtailment for 1 year and a half. These things being solved now. Timo.
Maybe to add just one point, it's important to keep in mind that many of these things have been done for the first time in these pioneering countries. So it's absolutely clear that mistakes will be made. For example, the technical standards that we have today, they've only become possible because some countries realized that there was a problem. So the thing really is, are we learning from the mistakes that have been made in the past? And there I would say yes, all these countries have taken their lessons, and the important part now is that these lessons are applied in the countries that are very many and that are just starting. And I think that's exactly where the value added of this publication comes in, because they can see it in there.
That was Simon Mueller finishing up that answer. Next question, please.
It comes from the line of David Knott. Please ask your question.
Hello, this is David Knott from Middle East Economic Survey. I was just wanting to ask if you've got any particular recommendations for Middle East and North African government planners.
Well, to have a very specific recommendation, that's of course a little bit difficult, but there's one thing in general that is very important for the Middle East and North Africa, and that is about generating capacity, especially solar, to see to it that you meet your domestic demand for energy, which will free fossils like oil and gas for export, and that is, for instance, in Saudi Arabia, but also in the Emirates. What we can see in Morocco, where we are working at this moment on an in-depth review of the energy situation in Morocco, there's a lot of talk and discussion about concentrating solar power, but that can only work if connections will be there, not only connections in North Africa, but also to Europe. Paulo.
Yeah, let me just give a further example of Morocco, which is very push in particular on solar, but also on wind. They are, and also because of our suggestions, following a good path in deploying a portfolio of renewable technologies, so a combination of wind, solar PV, but also concentrated solar power with storage, which adds flexibility to the system. And exactly this system thinking approach is what is needed.
Morocco is doing another very interesting thing. They brought together their renewable policy in a separate and specialized agency, and this is again something that is an example for other countries.
Next question, please.
Thank you.